I'll keep this one shorter because honestly, the details still make me feel sick to my stomach. My name is Ray, and I'm a guy, which I mention only because people always assume these kinds of things only happen to women. They don't. I was 29 and living alone in a house I rented in a quiet residential area. Small town, low crime, the kind of place where people leave their cars unlocked in the driveway and nobody thinks twice about it. I had moved there about 8 months before this happened, partly for a job at a local auto shop about 2 miles from the house, and partly because I just needed a quieter life for a while. I liked it there. It felt safe. I used to walk to work most days. The route was simple and pleasant. Residential streets the whole way, lots of trees, almost no traffic in the early morning. I liked the walk. It gave me time to think before a long shift. I had been doing it since my second week there, and it had become one of those small daily things I actually looked forward to. There was a man I started seeing on my walks. He always seemed to be going the opposite direction from me, so at first it felt like just a neighbor getting his morning exercise in. He was maybe mid-50s, slim, with short gray hair and always wearing the same type of clothes. Dark pants, a plain jacket, nothing memorable. I probably passed him 6 or 7 times over the course of 2 weeks and registered him about as much as I registered the stop signs, just another part of the scenery. But then I started noticing him on my walk home too. End of my shift, different time of day entirely, and there he was. Same man walking the opposite direction again, like he was always just out for a walk, no matter when I happens to be passing through. I noticed it maybe twice in 1 week, and I remember thinking it was a little odd, but not alarming. Some people just walk a lot. Some people have no schedule. I let it go. Then one evening, my neighbor Linda knocked on my door. Linda was in her late 60s, lived 2 houses down, and was the kind of person who paid attention to her street because she had lived there for 30 years and knew every face that belonged there. She asked me if I knew the man who had been standing across the street from my house. She said she had seen him twice that week, just standing on the sidewalk across from my front door, looking at the house. Not walking, not on his phone, just standing and looking. I had no idea what she was talking about. I asked her to describe him, and the description matched the man from my walks. Same gray hair, same dark pants, same plain jacket. Linda said both times he had stood there for several minutes before walking away, and both times it had been in the evening, around the time I usually got home from work. I stopped walking to work after that conversation. I started driving even though it was only 2 miles, and I hated the parking situation near the shop. And I ordered a cheap security camera online that arrived 2 days later. I mounted it above my front door so it covered the porch and the street directly in front of the house. I didn't tell many people about it. I just set it up and checked the footage each morning. 3 days after I installed it, the camera caught him. 11:47 p.m. The street was dark and quiet, and he walked into the frame from the left side. He stopped directly across from my house and stood there with his hands in his pockets. He didn't look around. He didn't check his phone. He just stared at the front of my house for 4 full minutes and then turned and walked out of the frame to the right. 4 minutes of standing in the dark staring at someone's house at midnight is not a coincidence. That is intention. I downloaded the footage onto my phone and drove to the police station the next morning. I want to give credit where it's due, because the officer I spoke to took it seriously from the moment I showed him the clip. He didn't try to explain it away or make me feel like I was overreacting. He took my phone, watched it twice, and then asked me to describe the man in as much detail as I could. About a week later, I got a call back from the department. They had identified him from a previous report filed by a resident in the next town over. The officer wouldn't give me the full details of what that prior report involved, but I remember the way he paused before he answered and the way he chose his words very carefully. Based on the look on his face when I had been sitting across from him at the station, and based on the tone of that phone call, I understood without being told directly that what this man had done before was not minor. He was picked up approximately a week after that call. I was not given full details of the charges, but I was told he was not simply released. Linda calling on me when she did was the thing that changed how this story ends. If she had minded her own business the way most people do, if she had just assumed I knew the man or that it was none of her concern, I don't know how long he would have kept coming back before something happened. Pay attention to your neighbors. Pay attention to the people around you. And if you see something that doesn't sit right, say something. It doesn't matter if you feel like you're overreacting. It doesn't matter if you're wrong. Being wrong costs you an awkward conversation. Being right and staying silent can cost a lot more than that.
This happened about 3 years ago when I was working retail at a mall. I was 24 at the time, and I closed the store most nights, which meant I was usually leaving the mall somewhere between 9:30 and 10 p.m. The mall had a parking garage attached to it, and I always parked on level P2 because it was closest to the employee entrance. It was just easier, less walking, faster exit. I had been doing it since my first week and never thought twice about it. For the first few months of working there, I never had any issues. The garage was well lit, and there were usually other employees leaving around the same time. We would walk out in little groups without even planning it, just naturally ending up together near the elevator because our shifts ended at the same time. It felt safe. It felt normal. It wasn't until we went through a stretch of layoffs that things changed. They cut our evening staff significantly, and I started closing alone most nights. That meant leaving alone too. No more accidental groups. Just me, the elevator, and the walk to my car in a half-empty concrete garage at 10 p.m. I told myself it was fine. Lots of people do it. The garage had cameras and bright lights and a security booth at the main exit. I was being dramatic. I kept telling myself that for weeks. The first time I noticed the man was a Wednesday night in February. I was walking to my car and I heard the elevator open behind me. A man stepped out and turned in the same direction I was walking. P2 is not a huge level, maybe 40 or 50 spots total. I got to my car, a silver Honda, and as I was unlocking it, I noticed he hadn't gotten into any car. He was just slowly walking the row, not looking for a car, not checking his pockets for keys, just walking slowly like he was out for a stroll in the middle of a parking garage at 10 at night. I got in and locked my doors immediately. He walked past my car without looking at me and disappeared around the corner. I sat there for a second, heart beating a little fast, then drove out. I told myself maybe he forgot where he parked. It happens. The second time was about a week later. Same elevator, same man, same slow walk through the row. This time I was parked closer to the elevator and I got a better look at him. He was somewhere in his 40s, I think, heavy set with a gray hoodie and work boots. He had this kind of blank look on his face that I can't really describe except to say it made me uncomfortable. There was nothing behind his eyes. Not anger, not friendliness, just nothing. Like he was completely empty. Again, he didn't get into any car. He walked the row slowly, almost the entire length of P2, then turned around and went back toward the elevator without ever stopping at a vehicle. I watched him the whole time from inside my locked car, and I didn't move until the elevator doors closed behind him. I mentioned it to my coworker Bree the next day, and she said she had seen someone matching that description in the garage before too, but hadn't thought anything of it. That made me feel slightly better and slightly worse at the same time. Better because I wasn't imagining things. Worse because it meant he had been coming back repeatedly and nobody had reported it. After that, I started varying where I parked on P2, different spots each night, hoping that if he was watching, he wouldn't know which car was mine. I also started texting my boyfriend Marcus when I left the store, so someone always knew I was on my way and what time to expect me. Marcus wanted me to let him pick me up, but our schedules didn't line up and I didn't want to make him wait around for an hour every night. Looking back, I really wish I had just let him. For about 2 weeks, nothing happened. I started to relax again. I even stopped varying my parking spot because I was tired of walking the extra distance at the end of a long shift. I convinced myself the man was just some weird regular who cut through the garage for whatever reason, and that I had blown it out of proportion. Then I found the note. I came out to the garage on a Thursday night, and there was a small piece of paper folded under my windshield wiper. I stood a few feet away from my car and just looked at it for a moment. I looked around the entire visible area of P2 before I even walked up to the car. Nobody visible. I picked up the note and unfolded it. It was a torn piece of lined paper, the kind from a school notebook, and written in messy block letters were 2 words: "Nice car." That was it. No name, no number, nothing else. My hands were shaking before I even finished reading it. I called Marcus immediately, and he could hear it in my voice before I even explained what happened. He wanted to come get me right then, and I let him. I stood in the stairwell near the employee entrance with the door held slightly open, watching the garage through the gap until I saw his headlights pull in. We went to mall security together that night, and they pulled up the camera footage covering my usual section of P2. What they found made my stomach drop. The camera that covered my parking area had been spray painted over. The lens was completely black. Security said it had been done recently, within the last few days, but they had no way of knowing exactly when, because nobody had noticed it during the routine checks. Nobody had been checking. The booth at the exit was staffed, but the monitors showing the garage feeds apparently were not being actively watched, just recording to a server somewhere that nobody looked at unless there was an incident. Mall security filed a report and said they would increase patrols through the garage. They also said they would review older footage from other cameras to see if they could get a clear image of the man. I don't know if they ever did, because by the next morning, I had already decided I was not going back. I called my manager and quit over the phone. I know some people would say I overreacted. I know some people would say I should have stayed and let security handle it. But I want to be very clear about something. A man had been coming to that garage specifically to walk past my car. He knew which car was mine. He had been watching closely enough to write a note and leave it on my windshield. And then someone had deliberately blinded the one camera that covered my spot. That was not a coincidence. None of that was a coincidence. Marcus and I moved to a different part of the city 6 months later, and I have never parked alone in an uncovered or partially monitored garage since. If I have to park somewhere that feels even slightly off, I wait until another person is walking the same direction, and I time it so I'm not alone. I know how that sounds. I know it might seem like a lot, but once you understand that someone can watch you for weeks without you ever knowing, you stop apologizing for being careful.
I never considered myself someone who pays close attention to their surroundings. I know that sounds bad, but I think most people are like that. You get into a routine and your brain just goes on autopilot. Wake up, go to work, come home. You stop actually seeing what's around you. That's exactly what he was counting on. My name is Dana, and I'm 27. At the time this happened, I was working at an office downtown. Nothing glamorous, data entry mostly. The job was fine, but the hours were rough. I worked a shift that ended at 7 p.m., which meant by the time I got out and made it to the subway, it was usually closer to 7:30. Not super late, but late enough that the trains were no longer packed. There would be maybe 10 or 15 people in a car instead of 50. My commute was about 35 minutes, subway downtown, then a 12-minute walk through my neighborhood to get to my apartment. I did this 5 days a week for almost 2 years. I knew that walk like the back of my hand. Same turns, same houses, same corner store where the owner would sometimes wave at me through the window. I don't remember the exact first time I saw him. That's the thing about this that bothers me most. He was so unremarkable that he didn't even register. Average height, dark jacket, baseball cap pulled low. He could have been anybody. I think the first time I genuinely noticed him was a Tuesday in October. I was walking the last stretch home and I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around out of instinct and there was a man, maybe half a block back, walking in the same direction. I didn't think anything of it. People walk on sidewalks. That's what sidewalks are for. The next day, same thing. I got off the subway and there was a man in a dark jacket and cap on the platform. I figured he was just another person getting off at my stop. There are a few apartment buildings near the station, so it wasn't unusual. I walked my route and I remember glancing back once near the corner store and he was still behind me. Still the same distance back. I walked faster and turned onto my street. When I got to my building and looked back, he wasn't there. I didn't think about it again. It was probably another week before it clicked. I was having a rough day at work and I was walking home on autopilot, not really paying attention to anything. I stopped at the corner store to grab a drink, and when I came out, I almost walked right into him. He was standing just outside the door. He looked at me and said, "Sorry," like he was just passing by. I stepped around him and kept walking. Something felt off, but I couldn't name it. That night, I told my roommate Jess about it, and she shrugged it off. I shrugged it off too. Then, a few days later, I was on the subway, and I looked up from my phone, and he was in the same car, sitting near the doors. Cap pulled low, dark jacket. I told myself I was being paranoid. Lots of people take the same train. but I watched him out of the corner of my eye the whole ride. And when I got off at my stop, he got off too. I walked faster than normal that night, and I didn't look back once until I was inside my building with the door locked behind me. I started paying attention after that, really paying attention. And once I started looking, I saw him everywhere. 3 times in 1 week on the subway, twice on my walk, once standing at the corner near my building doing nothing, just standing there looking at his phone. Every time I saw him, I tried to talk myself out of it. Maybe he lived nearby. Maybe he worked downtown too. Maybe I was losing my mind. The night everything changed was a Friday. I had stayed late at work and didn't leave until almost 9.
The streets were quieter than usual. I got on the subway, and he was already on it, not near me, but in the same car. I got off at my stop, and I could hear his footsteps behind me the second I hit the sidewalk. I didn't look back, I just walked. I turned onto my street, and the footsteps were still there. I got to my building and fumbled with my keys, and when I finally got the door open and turned around, he was stopped at the end of my block, just standing there, looking at me. I got inside and called the police. I know some people would say I had no proof of anything, and the officer I spoke to was polite but basically said the same thing. No crime had been committed. They couldn't do much. He did say he would have a patrol car swing by the area a few times that night. That weekend, I told my building manager and they added a new lock to the front entrance. I also bought pepper spray, which I now carry every single day. I haven't seen that man since. I don't know if the patrol scared him off or if he just moved on. I don't know what he wanted, and honestly, that unknowing is the worst part. I still think about him every single time I walk home from the subway. I probably always will.